This is a meeting of the education team for the IARPIC, which is Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee. And we have a number of teams and some foundational activities that are being planned for the next 5 years. We have a whole research plan that I think Meredith is going to put in the chat if you want to know more about IARPIC. But our education team is focused on trying to hold these meetings. We're going to have quarterly meetings. So thank you for being here for one of our earlier ones. And we intend to hold these meetings and try to develop a community of practice around Arctic education and STEM education in particular. Our team is very focused on creating opportunities for students in rural areas in Alaska and the Arctic, and trying to get more STEM into the curriculum and get have more opportunities available for students in rural areas. And we are both federal and public organizations, so there's opportunities for people to participate at many different levels. And we are delighted you're here. Hopefully everybody's putting their introductions in the chat and your affiliations. And I will go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Also, Kaya Bricks is my co-chair. She's from NOAA and she can't make it today, but I am the co-chair of this education committee, and some of our other members are also on the call here. So our speaker today is Adam Lowe. He's the director of Upward Bound at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, has been there since 2019. And before that, he has been affiliated with the T3 Alliance, which brings technology and STEM education into schools all across the nation, actually, as well as in Alaska. And the Modern Blanket Toss, which was one of your projects. You were an award-winning teacher, the Alaska STEM Teacher of the Year in 2008, and have been involved in curriculum development for science education for many, many years. So welcome, welcome. We're very glad to have you here. And I will turn the floor over to you. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. And it is absolutely an honor to be speaking to this group here today. I recognize that many of you have had a career in science or in education or wherever got you to this point right here. And thank you for the work you're doing on this committee. And I also echo the land acknowledgement that I'm here saying hello from Fairbanks, the ancestral homelands of the Dene people. And I speak to you today about a program that is on the homelands of many individuals, and it's on their shoulders that this program is able to be strong through an alliance. So I'm going to open up my screen share. You're going to see my messy desktop, but sometimes that's just how life is, and then we'll get started. So here we go. And as someone who's been a teacher for a while, I am totally comfortable with somebody saying, hey, can we unpack that a second or talk a little bit? As my name is Adam Lowe, and I'm director of T3 Alaska, director of UAF Upward Bound. And here's a little about me to get started. First, I was born and raised in Alaska. My parents came up in the 70s to do work on Anilka, and my dad was an economist. My mom was a teacher, and grew up here, went to college, and got a chance to work as a geologist in the field. That was the funnest job you can imagine, but relationships and getting married, and I became a science teacher. And I worked worked internationally, and I worked in Cordova, and I worked for 8 years in Hawaii, both running makerspaces, the director of a technology program that focused on Hawaiian cultural values. And yeah, I live in Fairbanks now. I've been here for 3 years. I direct the UAF Upward Bound Classic, and just as of last week, the UAF Upward Bound Math Science Grant. So last Friday, news is right now, we got a big award for an extra program for Upward Bound. So I'll share, what does it mean to have an Upward Bound program? Because for some of you, that's new. And then I love to ride bikes with my dogs, and a lot of other things about being in Alaska. I share on the very bottom here of the screen a picture of how things were last night as I'm trying to map together what does an audience like you guys really need to hear about the T3 program. And I hope to share a story of how a grant was built on the back of a functioning program, the Upward Bound program. And it's been able to expand to something that is now touching the lives of more and more students in Alaska and affecting the way we do education. And it's a story, we'll unpack it, but there is moments for you to question at the end and or interrupt me as we're going through. First, the Upward Bound program is, in this map over here, there's a little dot showing some of the 900 plus Upward Bound programs around the country. This is a Department of Education initiative that helps to help underserved high school students make the transition to college. In Fairbanks in Alaska in 2018, we only had one. At the time this was printed, the UAF Upward Bound program had a pause, but now we have 2 in Fairbanks and 2 in Anchorage. The Fairbanks Upward Bound program is a little unique in that each of these communities around the outside are ones that we work with. We fly them in for a 6-week summer program, and we pay teachers like an extracurricular coaching duty contract to provide academic support throughout the year. This program has been going for a long time. Every place Upward Bound programs exist, it's a good thing to connect in with them because they have willing and ready students ready to do STEM or do learning stuff like that. But it was on the back of this that my predecessor, John Monahan, wrote a grant called the Modern Blanket Toss, or well, that brought us into this thing called the Alaska T3 program, or the T3 Alliance. And on this graphic right here, I kind of have the basic at its core recipe of what are we talking about when we say, what does it look like to have a T3 site or a T3 program? Essentially, you work with an administrator and an educator. And it's really important that it's both of them, because you can have rock star teachers who don't feel supported in their administrative capacity, and it can be difficult. So it's important when you start a community, you talk to the school and you train up an educator so that they understand what it means to have a safe learning environment, to create and facilitate a growth mindset, that they understand what it means to have a little bit of project-based learning to learn some basic STEM skills, and a little bit of problem-based learning where you listen to people in your community, you listen to families, you listen to however we define community, right? I mean, it can be the community of our school, the community of the region of Alaska we're in, or bigger. But that process, when we go through that process, you come out with a healthier community. You have students who are ready to solve problems. They're poised for a workforce. You have students who know how to access resources, and community members who are happy to collaborate with them. So it's happened over the last decade. It was only yesterday that, as I was putting the slide deck together, realizing, wow, we have had a history of producing this, and we are good at this. There's a little bit of imposter syndrome that comes when you talk to a group of this magnitude, but really we've been doing this, and the story I hope we can share is some of what has worked, what hasn't worked, and how we are working to make T3 today into something that is growing and is going to and will affect students in the future. So I know I get excited about this, and sometimes anyway. Why did NSF fund this program? This is the first National Science Foundation grant that John Monahan wrote to go on the back of an Upward Bound program. Remember, there were 10 sites around Alaska that UAF funded? Well, this was a test. Half of the program, half of the sites, we're going to give them drones and training and that kind of stuff. And then half of the sites, we won't. The results were so strong and stark that students who had a chance to do community projects, down on the bottom of that picture, I think is a 3D model of a stream outside of Seward, one of our towns. And the students helped the community by being able to map more cheaply than the community was already doing with their flood control board. That was an example of a community project that can kind of work. The National Science Foundation came back and said, we would like to see this expanded for a broadening participation grant. And so they said, let's work with EPSCoR sites. And this map shows the EPSCoR states. I'm sure this audience knows exactly who the EPSCoR states are, the ones that don't have a lot of federal funding. And we worked with teachers from 32 sites in 17 states. And a lot of the operations of that experience came through a partnership that we facilitated with a nonprofit, Educating for Leadership. This is what it looked like. And I'm way over in the corner over there. This is like Reno, one of the Upward Bound sites, where we bring all this technology and we send this technology to Upward Bound sites around the country and say, here, teachers, let's go. And the growth mindset that we hold in that area, the learning how to use stuff, and the learning how to facilitate a community engagement process for both administrators and teachers was significant. Some of these people are still running T3 programs, even though the grant that was funded ended in 2019. So that on its own is pretty exciting. Here's what we taught them essentially, that, hey, if you start with a growth mindset, and that means as a teacher, as a community, you are facilitating physically and emotionally safe learning environment. And sometimes that's the one that it's harder, the emotional safety, to be yourself in a room where you're either feeling a certain way or not. Anyway, that is what in their space they facilitate. Then find tech skills, and we give them a bunch of technologies that they get to learn up on. And then facilitate community engagement opportunities. And that final one is very much of an art form, but it's just like anything, you can get better at it, and teachers and communities come together to help make those processes happen. The basic technologies were, Raspberry Pis, these $35 programmable computers, 3D printing, and autonomous systems. And, autonomous went in all directions, everything from drones to hydroponic grow towers that could move through things. So it works with a process. In the beginning, we say, hey, students, you're building a computer. Oh my gosh, wow, you just did this. And the students feel excited. They programmed up something that can do a task. Over here in this picture, there's one of the programming languages we use, Node-RED, and students have all just turned light bulbs on or figured out a way to make a selfie station or something like that. The point is they use that technology to do something cool that makes them feel like, awesome, I did it. Then our next phase comes in. When you get a group of students that are on fire, they know how to use technology, then it's time to say, what can you do with that technology? Well, for that, we use the design thinking process. And that first bullet there is one of the most important teaching moments in this whole process. What does it mean to truly empathize? Because, communication means putting yourself in someone else's shoes. So imagine if you are in a community and the first job you have is to go and empathize with elders, empathize with, your principal at school, empathize with a researcher who's coming to share some projects or some problems that they see. That empathy skill set can be taught when you learn to capture that, defining what the problem is. And that's a place to pull in researchers, helpers to get a little bit more, brainstorm up some kind of solution. Better in a team to do that. If you can build it on its own, like it's a video that you need to produce, then prototype it, build it, do it. But if you need to buy something, then there's a process for getting some grant funding. And if I were to say one of the most important points of the Upward Bound the T3 Alliance grant is it purposefully put in discretionary funds for each site that had a T3 program. So when students get to tech skills, they're ready to go do something with it. And we find that it depends on where you're from. If you're in corn country, then maybe you've got a garden, notification thing. I don't, we could go on to examples for that in a little bit, but recently we've moved to recognizing that there is an actual science in this thing, and it's the difference between, it's what makes this strong. It's an adaptable model, and adaptable, I have PBL versus PBL. That's project-based learning versus problem-based learning. And as an educator from years of classroom teaching, I know that a lot of science labs are project-based learning. Hey, I want you to, build this thing that will go across this thing. Yep, there we go, do it. And problem-based learning is a much more, a much harder thing to operate as a teacher, because you don't exactly know where it's going to go. But you know that if you follow a process, you'll have meaningful group collaborations, you'll have friendships forms, you'll have processes that pull in the community and really make things happen. I think you got to do some project-based learning to get your skill set up, and we, have a process what that looks like. When we bring in community partners, this is, I think, one of the reasons why part of what has made T3 be able to succeed this year, and not succeed, it has allowed T3 to expand in Alaska, and it's the contribution of some of the outside partners that have made it possible to make this happen. I'll come back to that point later, I promise. So community partners, pull them in, ask them to share, and we can even train up community partners with a reverse pitch guideline that they understand, how am I being asked to talk to a community when I come in and share something go on. This is more of a graphic that those on my team have helped put together to describe the pathway. Remember that pipeline, graphic that we just looked at, where there's, the community, and then there's the pipeline, and then out on the other side comes this. This is sort of like what's happening inside that pipeline. There's students bumping into project-based learning, earning badges for I just learned to build a Raspberry Pi computer. I learned to do basic 3D printing. They can write mini grants, be attuned to writing mini grants for, that there are courses that they can access, and those courses build upon those mini grants, or build upon the badges and such, and can actually be dual credit courses for their high school. There's actually up to certifications. We've got students working to get their 107 flight license so that they can participate in drone workshops that they're orchestrating for their community. But problem-based learning is the big, I'd say it is the rich ground that is place-based learning in our communities, that is absolutely fundamentally respectful, because you're working with students, they're empathizing, they're helping you connect in ways to things that matter. And here's where T3 kind of sits now. Remember, I shared that there was a National Science Foundation grant. There was lots of, sites around the country in 17 different states. When the grant ended in 2019, there were certain states, certain upward bound programs that said, let's keep this going. Let's keep working on these kind of opportunities. In most of these states, they are still upward bound programs. In Alaska, we've expanded beyond just the upward bound program through partnerships with other federal funding agencies. And I'll talk about those in a minute. But think of that nexus of the T3 program as that nonprofit partner that we facilitated during both Modern Blanket Toss and during the T3 Alliance National Science Foundation grant. They put on our trainings. They help us organize trainings like that. They help us with orchestrating curriculum and making the website that I'm sure if you Googled us, you'd land over there. They have the ability to act as an intrastate agency to say, let's have a club focused on energy topics. And through the nonprofit, in next month, beginning in November, there's a T3 Alaska, T3 Maui, and T3 Boise State or Idaho that are meeting together to work on a project. There's a drone club that's building curriculum. Club. Think of that model clubs, because when we think of powerful programs, it's been sites that act like clubs, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. Here's one of the ways I can share the ways that T3 has worked to support a scope and sequence for how does this work in a community. In K-6 time period, there's the STEAM Fest. When you get to a 7th or 8th grader, it's inclusion. Freshmen are, we're recruiting brand new freshmen, and then up to post high school where students are in college, and we're finding that students who have gone through this program are really sought after as possible interns. And honestly, we hire them in the UAF makerspace and allow them to partner with researchers and partner with other programs back in the communities. So this is where we stand right today with T3 Alaska. The first is the Office of Naval Research Arctic program is what gave me a quarter of my salary so that I could focus on things outside of just the Upward Bound program, my regular job. UARC, University Affiliated Research Centers, associated with the Geophysical Institute, have helped pay for half of someone's salary to help us with curriculum integration for seismic stuff. The United States Forest Service in Wrangell has done an awesome job, facilitating students in that site, going out and doing, sorry, that's my dog. Hang on. That's home life in the Zoom world. Anyway, and UAF has invested also in making our program more. I put down here individual districts because we've actually had situations where there are new communities that have said, I'm going to pay for myself with existing funding to become a T3 site. And that kind of initiative is showing that our group is growing. At UAF, we have a makerspace that acts as a hub and spoke kind of repository for both expertise on the different technologies that happen out in the sites, in the Arctic support world. And I put this slide up as the Office of Naval Research. One of the programs that T3 is involved in is in their community innovation hub model that they're describing. And I can just talk a little bit about what I know of this from my perspective, but in the end, they see that having a healthy community innovation hub means that you've got students and communities that are ready to partner and be collaborators on your data situation or other. Here's an example of some students, I think, who did something with a community pitch project, making a data recorder that had, a battery that actually worked in Arctic conditions. And that's one group of students wrote a mini grant, listened to a pitch, and they were off. This is a program that's being run, in partnership, but it's Alaska Seismology and Schools program. And they use our T3 Alliance sites and facilitate a seismic network ambassador club and have experiences in it. I bring up one of our sites, Wrangell, where they had a relationship where they met folks from the Forest Service who had a need of mapping the cabins in the region, and the Forest Service was able to work with a nonprofit to facilitate students' flights out to remote cabins, and they used their skills and made that difference in those ways. I could fill the rest of our conversation with other examples of cool projects that students have done, but I think of those as the tip of the iceberg. It's like, this is happening when you have a safe learning environment and you have access to, the opportunities that we're able to coordinate as part of a strong network. But students this summer built an automated, seismic shutoff valve for in the effect that there's an earthquake for a gas line. These students are building a scale model of a power grid system or developing an app that's in ways to affect energy usage in communities, or a seismic modeling tool. All of these examples are stuff that comes out of a group of students who are working on things. This is one of my, why do I do this, or why is it helpful? This is a picture of the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell, a guy who advised George Lucas on the creation of Star Wars, recognized that in all cultures, there is some aspect where you bring your youth upward and help them become part of their community. In this graphic, what I see is a lot of opportunities for mentorship to happen along the way. And here's students in any one of their communities. And when they are given an opportunity to go on to a learning adventure and meeting a mentor. Maybe that starts with your teacher, maybe that starts with somebody in the community, a researcher who comes to share, but there's a little bit of struggle that you have to go through as you're trying to do that process. And those trials and failure are things that I think a community that's working with a group of students on a project really helps facilitate. Just as, you know, last night before presenting to all of you, I had to say, wow, what am I sharing here? And a community comes through to say, hey, Adam, you got this. You know, you've been doing this for 10 years. You've been working with students in these different areas. When that group of students comes back and does something that they're proud of in their community, there's an opportunity for the community to celebrate them. And that's part of what happens when T3 organizes statewide conventions. Part of what happens when you know, we invite some students who have been part of a project to a state conference or a national conference and say, please stand up and help out. I think that this model has a little bit about, you know, individualistic versus, you know, non-individualistic collectivistic societies, which is what we see in the Alaskan Native communities versus our Western, you know, fishing towns. And where they come together is that I've watched as students everywhere and community members everywhere want to help their community. And when it's framed in that way, then this becomes, you know, not just a you know, a STEM education program, it's a suicide prevention program. It's a, you know, it's a workforce development program, and it's a leadership program. And my hope is that the swath of National Science Foundation grants, or not National Science Foundation, but just federal grant funding that's coming towards Alaska in the name of infrastructure bill and associated things, we have the capacity in our communities to be able to say, is there, you know, equity here in our internet, you know, connectivity? Is there equity? You know, how do we use data? How do we communicate? How do we take the pulse of the earth and be part of the process? So that's kind of where I see. My team also said, hey, put down these 4 bullet points to end on your thing here. And the first, you know, T3 is an adaptable model. You can mix it around in a different community. It will look different in Shishmaref than it will in Wrangell. But leadership skills are part of it. Sustainability, the fact that we started with an NSF grant and that it built upon the Upward Bound program, and that it ended, and now that the grant and energies and objectives are still moving forward, that's huge. We have a platform for bringing new partners in. We are working with Alaska Blue Economy Center. We are working with, you know, a quasi, there are partnerships that are forming, but it's possible to expand access to more sites and participants. We essentially this year said that in any one of the communities that we're in, you are able to be you're able to be a T3 student. And if you qualify for Upward Bound, then we'll check you off on that one. If you don't, then there's other funding sources that help out making that happen there. And then, you know, authentic community partnerships. And yeah, that's where I don't need to go into badges. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share, and I'll open the floor for questions. And
thank you so much. That is an exciting program you got going there. And does anyone have questions? Aaron?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. That was terrific. One of the things I really love about it is the community engagement that comes out at the end, where you know, how can we apply this to a problem that our community has? I think that's really energizes, you know, the team building and the engagement with the technology. I think that's a really strong element of it. I wondered, just as a someone who's more familiar with the Alaska Native Science and Engineering program than the T3 program, could you talk about, are there connections between those two efforts?
You know, yeah, thank you for that question. In rural Alaska, it's kind of interesting. I'll go to a community and say, hey, I'm here, I'm Upward Bound. This is back when I used Upward Bound as the only carrot to get you in the door. And there was competition between Rawhigh, NSF, and Upward Bound as students saying, "Oh, I want to do something this summer, but I don't know what." And I haven't had a formal relationship with NSF. I know that they are doing good work in the communities that we're in. I think that what I've been aware of is that the process we use to engage students in problem-based learning essentially is pretty unique, because it's hard for a program to scale up in that way. It's much easier as a expanding STEM program to build really awesome Kiwi kits. And I've gone down that route with, hydroponic grow towers or other things. They can be a project in terms of you learn skills by following this set of routines, setting up a weather station. But when a weather station array becomes part of a solution that happens when the community gets together and says, what are we going to do about the storms that just hit us? How do we protect ourselves? How do we think about that? And then it's like a suite of options. I don't see very many other programs with the capacity to do that, because honestly, that's that little bit of discretionary funding that we've been giving with Upward Bound funds, where we say, hey, in your community, if you want to hire an elder to come in or to go out on a boat or visit a location with somebody, then we can make that happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That actually clarified for me when you talked about process-based learning versus problem-based learning, that I would say that NSF is definitely more process focused, and definitely focused on students advancing through the whole academic ladder all the way through graduate school. I mean, they have a terrific and very commendable program, but it is, I don't see that element in what they do. And so I appreciate that that is part of this, of your project. Yeah. Thank you.
Sarah?
First of all, Adam, you're awesome. I want to meet you and work with you someday. Second of all, I hope that the National Science Foundation and other funders, all ONR and all these others, and I hope this can be a model for grants and how grants are offered and funded in the future, because so many entities are afraid of this kind of work because they want clear outcomes and they want to know exactly what the students are going to do, but they don't necessarily understand that the students actually having to listen to the students to find out what they care about and then doing the whatever is not part of the typical grant situation. So I want to just emphasize that. And then hopefully people on this call just heard that. They have power to influence those processes. And then thirdly, I just curious. So I do outreach with the International Arctic Buoy Program. We have all kinds of big ideas in the hopper right as we speak, but we're looking for those partners in Alaska, in Anchorage, to maybe do an exchange with like Utqiagvik young people and Anchorage young people or Seattle young people or whatever. I'm just curious, in your framework, is there an opportunity? How can people who have really, how can we partner? And not just us, but like other groups that have real strong ideas or
absolutely. And thank you for those comments, and thank you for that question. I think as I've been working with different regions of our university, I started in the Arctic program is an ASAP, Alaska Center for Energy and Power project, facilitated process, but every industry has a need for engaging that next generation of excited students. And I think that the exchanges that happen on a T3 program, either like this summer where I, as an Upward Bound program, contracted with that nonprofit to say, help me run a summer program. And the Hawaii's Upward Bound director contracted and said, help me run a summer program. So we shared the summer program, brought 25 students from Hawaii to Alaska and all these different rural students there. We partnered with the Sea Grant folks, with ASAP, and with another group, Alaska Earthquake Center, and they helped us with curriculum and helped us orchestrate stuff. I mean, just the fact that Alaska Earthquake Center said, this is important to us enough to say half of someone's salary is going to be dedicated towards doing whatever we can, so that in those communities, when groups of students say, hey, I wonder about that earthquake I just felt, or could I actually feel the waves in my place, that he is right there and ready to turn around and say, yeah, let's design up a solution for this. And you've got the whole entire Alaska Earthquake Center behind you, kid in Quinhagak or kid in wherever. And that's pretty cool. It is so, the kids are even on their own signing up for evening courses that are like seismology in Alaska course, where you have to have one of these little seismometers, to be playing the game, but one of them can be in a school and everybody pays attention to it. And it's like, it's a pathway for, Mike West and the folks at Alaska Earthquake Center to be involved in the future of these communities. And what I've heard from the researcher side is when they fly into a small town in rural Alaska and they land there and they've got the coolest thing out there that they're going to set up, a weather station, a snow sensing, whatchamacallit, to have a group of students who just come up and say, oh, can we empathize with what you're working on? Not that they'll use those words. They'll just say, what are you doing? And then they'll be quiet and listen and that kind of stuff. But in the end, you having partnerships, or any researcher having partnerships where they're authentic and that student is somehow curious about it, believe me, it helps the community, it helps that student as much as it helps you, the researcher, to have, a literate data collector on that other side, if that's what it comes out to. But I recognize in the world of grants, sometimes you need to write things so that they come out the way they need to come out. And T3 says it's a STEM program, but I really think art is just as important. And the students who start becoming artists as they come out of there because they've learned to express a need in a community, that's awesome. So thank you. And yes,
I
look
may
forward to
follow
meeting
up with
you.
an email.
Okay, awesome.
Jennifer.
Hey, Adam. Adam, so it's funny, Adam and I actually have a connection to Cordova, Alaska. I taught in Cordova right before Adam came to Cordova. And so kind of funny. I know your name and from that and seeing there. And so I'm currently in Washington, D.C. serving as an Einstein Fellow. And one of the things that I've been learning a lot about is convergence education. And I feel like that this is a really great example of that, as we've been looking for ways to explain how it's different, or as I've been trying to understand how it's different from project-based learning, and that convergence is transdisciplinary education, but that it needs to revolve around a true real-world problem, that an actual something that students need or can engage with, that is a real problem out there, not just something we manufacture in a classroom for them to do a project around. And I just wanted to make that comment that I feel like this is a great example of that type of convergence in education.
Cool.
Thanks. That's a good segue to my question, which is, could you talk a little more about your connections to the Energy Innovation Network and the Alaska Blue Economy Center?
Yes. So the Alaska Innovation Network, which is under the Arctic program, and I remember I was going to write down what was that an acronym for, but we can Google it later. I know it's about creating energy resiliency hubs in two communities, Cordova and Kotzebue, and T3 was asked to be a part of that in large part because we pull in researchers as students are experiencing or going through this process, and that authentic listening to what are some issues that are being faced in your community. From the research side, from Arctic, both Kotzebue and Cordova are energy pioneers. They're leaders. They do all sorts of cool stuff with their grids, and have lots of national science found or just national level organizations attuned to what's happening. And I think we have been going back and setting up T3 sites in those communities, it is a process of, in Cordova, I was a teacher there for 8 years. So a little bit is like, oh, it's Adam, let's come back and listen to him talk. And then a little bit of it is, we have a lot of opportunities, and the mariculture side of it is just as powerful, because as students in their community look at what are the cool things happening here and what are the cool job opportunities, what am I interested in listening to, we really need to facilitate in each community like a bit of a strategic doing process, or a strategic planning process, where they map out what are our community's assets, or what are the opportunities that are coming there, and then let's identify which way our group is going to go. And what we've, the distinction that I think your question brings up, although it is going to take a few steps to get back to where it originated, we recognize that the way a T3 program is most functional is when there's almost a student-driven club of students who are like, hey, I'm president of this group. We're, focusing our energy on doing cool stuff with renewable energy because that's happening right now. Or, we're doing stuff with, a greenhouse modification project or something else. And the role of the coaches becomes more of, I'm like a Cub Scout leader. I keep a safe learning environment. I facilitate with some badgeable curriculum that is both fun to engage in and easy to achieve. And it takes away that anxiety that so many teachers, and I've been this one too. And I know as I train teachers around Alaska, that is the biggest barrier that they're overcoming is, do I have to be an expert at the technology that I'm about to show students before I teach it? Or can I learn alongside them and really, be a part of this safe learning environment? And, where we also see in rural Alaska teachers turnover, so when it's owned by a club and by extension, the community that are working with it, then we have continuity. And I think, your question, I apologize. I need a refresh on the question, and then
Connections to the blue economy and the energy innovation. But I think you answered that in that you let the students lead. If you offer those connections to them, and if they jump on it, then it happens.
And where I'd say the most valuable, partnership with an organization like the Blue Economy Program or ASAP is that they have existing partners who have been building educational curriculum for a period of time. And that, when we look at it, like it's information that me having this information means that I'm better prepared to do the next, kind of project in our community, and making that packageable, asynchronous, it kind of club-like, where we can learn that bit of content. Maybe it's adopted by the teacher who says, we'll weave it into something we're doing in our science class, but maybe it runs, as on that one graphic I showed with, T3 National in the center, there's a drone club and there's an energy club. And there's also a seismic club and there's a mariculture club. And you could be in one of these communities and say, I'm in all 5 clubs. This is the coolest thing ever. But you could also be in one of those communities where it's like, yeah, the one that I'm most focused on that really makes me curious is this marine, tourism one, because I think I have a job there someday, or because it's really part of what resonates with me. And my hope is that as our program grows and we get more partners who aren't just in seismic and renewable energy and mariculture and drone kind of autonomous systems, that we grow, and we have partnerships with NOAA, we have partnerships with ICE stuff. We've been working with Juneau Icefield Research Program. That was another one that I brought up that I'm a former Juneau Icefield Research Program participant from 1993. And here I love the fact that the guy who runs it is reaching out and saying, hey, a lot of the cool stuff that we're still doing, and we've written ourselves into different grants as outreach and partnership. And students from Florida went to the ice field this last summer. And so there's a lot of cool connections that are happening. But I really think T3 is a network of connected folks who work together to get things happening, and less about a fun work.
Thanks. And Bill?
Yeah, Adam, I'm wondering, Aaron, also, we're working in a museum context. And I wonder if the program, if you have links with museums, or you've experimented with bringing museums into this kind of stuff, or whether it's largely school classroom based.
Yeah, thank you. No, so in all honesty, we have not grown in that capacity yet, but my hope is that, this year we're bringing on 6 new sites, T3 sites around Alaska. As we bring on more capacity to have groups that can facilitate and help with that process, we would like to be eventually in all the schools and in museums and in communities. We think at UAF and at the collegiate level, we don't call it the T3 makerspace at UAF campus anymore. We just call it UAF makerspace, a T3, approved, or a T3, supported, whatchamacallit. And then that way we can walk over to the machine shop, a beautiful, beautiful makerspace that's been in operation for 50 years and work and say, what will it take for this place to become that safe learning environment that has, a process that you can go through. Something I should mention is that all the maker spaces, both at campus and in our sites, have a process for filling out a mini grant, and our teachers and our partners give the authority to fund those relatively rapidly. So, it's $300, but it's enough to say, hey, we're helping grandma with a project in our house, or we're helping the community partner who said, can we get a fish counter that we built for cheaper than $10,000, and we'll try to do it with a whatchamacallit. And that, adds to that. So.
Great, thank you. We are reaching the end of the hour, and I wanted to leave a little time for announcements. So thank you, Adam. This was just a wonderful presentation, and I'm delighted to know about the organization and all the great work you're doing. Does anybody have something they would like to announce? Any upcoming events?
No, but I have a question actually, if I may. So hi, Adam, thank you for the presentation. So hey, since you have experience on other states and with other kinds of communities actually, what are the challenges you find, in terms of learning processes when you look at Alaskan communities compared to probably other communities? Just very succinct, if you have.
Yeah, sure. So it is very interesting going across the country. We have programs in Puerto Rico and Marshall Islands, in Vermont and in Mississippi, and in the more traditionally Western influenced societies, even our fishing communities along Alaska, where innovation, farming communities where innovation and that kind of lens is the already part of the culture, then I find it's a little easier. But when students come together and have an opportunity to share at a camp kind of environment, or like a summer program or in other ones, then, the appreciation for other ways of learning and knowing start to happen. And I've found that that in rural Hawaii and in rural Alaska, you are so much further by creating a story arc that you committing to helping your community will help you be a good community member. And in the Western ones, it's like even grades and how much money you might make when you graduate because you could be a computer science person. And I also try to find mentors from every community who can come back and speak with that group of students. So that's like listening for that community out there that is ready and willing to give of themselves to contribute to the health of a program. And I really like to leave that locus of control. What does your program look like with that group of students, that teacher, that administrator, and our community partners? Because we go to Shishmaref and it will look so different than it will in Hilo, Hawaii.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Any final questions, announcements?
Well, as an announcement, yesterday, our faculty senate approved the air system sciences, which includes obviously atmospheric and climate sciences, geophysics, geosciences, and all the integration across horizontal integration across disciplines. And this is really wonderful. So because it creates a hub for all the disciplines to share across. I mean, and also seeing as the National Academy of Sciences in terms of air system sciences education. Yeah. Thanks.
That's terrific. Congratulations on getting that through.
More than 8 years.
Okay, Adam, you're getting lots of messages in the chat.
You save these for me or send them to me or something? Or I'll try to copy and paste them all right now before I get off.
I think Meredith, you're recording, right? Or
I'm recording, yes, and I am capturing the discussion and
Awesome,
the
thank
chat
you.
as well. Mhm.
Thank you.
okay, super.
Anytime any of you find yourselves in Fairbanks, I'm always willing to go out for a cup of coffee or whatever to talk story.
Okay. Well, I think we will wind up here and give everybody back 5 minutes, and please join me in thanking Adam. That was just great, and I can't wait to see what all your students do in the future to solve their community problems. I think this is just an excellent program. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa.
And we will be in touch, I'm sure. Our next meeting is going to be January, so we'll let everybody know what the date when that happens. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.